When my sister raised her glass at Christmas dinner and announced she had just bought her dream house, my mother didn't look at her. She looked at me. Must be nice to build a real life instead of floating around like a lost soul, my mom scoffed, right before the whole table burst into laughter. They called me the family disappointment because I wasn't married, didn't own a suburban home, and refused to follow their traditional path. But as my sister smirked and asked when I was finally going to settle down, I didn't cry. I pulled out a single folder, set it on the dining table, and said, "I already settled down. I just bought the entire commercial block your new home sits on." Before I tell you how their arrogant smiles turned to absolute horror, drop a comment below with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story reaches. My name is Chloe, I'm 27 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the black sheep of the Whitaker family. In our household, success was measured by a very rigid checklist: graduate by 22, get a stable corporate job by 24, and be comfortably married with a mortgage before hitting 30. My older sister, Vanessa, followed that script to perfection. She was the golden child, constantly praised for every predictable milestone she reached. Then there was me. While Vanessa was collecting domestic achievements, I was quietly taking a massive gamble on myself. I dropped out of traditional corporate climbing to launch my own commercial real estate firm. To my family, this made no sense. Because I didn't have a husband to introduce at Thanksgiving or a suburban home to show off at family barbecues, they automatically assumed I was struggling, lost, and failing at life. Every family gathering felt like an interrogation. My mother would sigh heavily whenever my name came up, whispering to relatives that I was just finding myself, while Vanessa built a real future. They looked down on my frugal apartment, my old car, and my late nights. What they didn't know, what none of them could have possibly guessed, was that while they were laughing at my solitude, I was quietly building a multi-million-dollar empire right beneath their noses. And this Christmas, their smug assumptions were about to shatter into a million pieces. The air in my mother's formal dining room was thick with the scent of roasted turkey, pine needles, and undeniable arrogance. It was Christmas Eve, and as usual, the entire table was set up like a stage for Vanessa to shine. She sat at the head and next to her fiancé, beaming with the kind of self-righteous confidence only a golden child could possess. My mother fussed over them endlessly, adjusting their silver wine goblets while completely ignoring the fact that I'd been sitting quietly in the corner for over an hour. As the second course was served, Vanessa clinked her glass with a silver spoon, clearing her throat to capture everyone's attention. "We have a huge announcement," she beamed, resting her hand on her fiancé's arm. "We officially closed on our dream home yesterday. 4 bedrooms, a sprawling backyard, in the most exclusive master-planned community in the city." The room erupted into cheers and applause. My mother clasped her hands together, tears actually welling up in her eyes. "Oh, Vanessa, a real home, a real adult life. I couldn't be prouder." Then, right on cue, my mother turned her gaze toward me, her smile instantly morphing into a pitying frown. "Must be nice to build a real life instead of floating around like a lost soul," she scoffed softly, though loud enough for the entire table to hear. A ripple of low chuckles passed through my aunts and uncles. Vanessa smirked, swirling her wine as she looked at me with pure condescension. "Seriously, Chloe," Vanessa added, her voice dripping with synthetic concern. "When are you finally going to settle down? You're 27. Don't you want to actually accomplish something before it's too late?" Sitting at that table, listening to their cruel amusement, my mind flashed back to the 5 long years that had led to this exact moment. While my family was busy whispering about my aimless life, I was grinding 18 hours a day in total obscurity. While Vanessa spent her weekends on luxury vacations and shopping sprees, I was living in a modest 1-bedroom apartment, eating basic meals, and plowing every single dollar I made back into my commercial real estate ventures. I deliberately missed family birthday parties and weekend getaways, not because I was lost, but because I was negotiating land acquisitions, pitching to private investors, and studying urban development plans until my eyes burned. Every sacrifice was calculated. Every dollar saved was a brick in the foundation of the empire I was quietly building. To my family, my frugal lifestyle was concrete proof that I was struggling. When I showed up to holiday dinners in simple clothes and drove a 6-year-old hatchback, my mother would offer me leftover food with a look of unbearable pity. They misconstrued my privacy as shame. They thought I didn't talk about my work because I was embarrassed, when in reality, I kept quiet because I knew the sheer scale of my success would terrify them. I let them believe whatever lie made them feel superior. I endured their condescending advice, their subtle jabs, and their endless comparisons. I swallowed my pride time and time again because I knew the golden rule of real power. Move in silence and let your results speak for you. Now, sitting across from my smirk-faced sister and my disappointed mother, I realized the quiet phase was finally over. It was time to speak. Vanessa wasn't satisfied with just making a quiet announcement. She wanted a full performance. She opened her designer leather tote bag, pulled out a pristine folder, and spread out the high-gloss photographs of her new property right between the dinner platters. "Look at the master suite, Mom," Vanessa gloated, pointing at the glossy pages. "And the community center down the road is top tier. It's part of the new Oak Ridge commercial phase, the most expensive, fast-growing development in the entire region. It's a rent-to-own agreement, but in 5 years, it'll be fully ours." My mother squeezed Vanessa's hands, tears glistening in her eyes. "You've built a real future, sweetheart. You're leaving a legacy." Then she turned back toward me, her voice dipping into that insufferable, patronizing tone. "Take notes, Chloe. Maybe if you spent less time dreaming and more time listening to your sister, you wouldn't be sitting here empty-handed at 27. The table erupted into light laughter once again. Uncle Bob shook his head, while my aunt took a slow sip of wine, looking at me with pure pity. They genuinely believed I was going to shrink into my chair, lower my head, and swallow my embarrassment like I always did. Instead, I took a calm, deliberate sip of my water. I set my glass down without making a sound. The smirk on Vanessa's face grew wider, convinced she had finally broken my spirit in front of everyone. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't hurt. I was ready. Unzipping my tote bag, I pulled out a heavy, dark blue legal folder bearing an official gold seal. Without saying a single word, I reached across the dining table and placed it down directly beside Vanessa's glossy brochures. Vanessa scoffed, tapping her polished nails on the mahogany table. "What's this, Chloe?" "A list of your resolutions." "Open it," I replied, my voice steady and cold as steel. Frowning, Vanessa slid the blue folder toward her and flipped open the heavy cover. My mother leaned in, expecting some trivial document, but as Vanessa's eyes scanned the first page, her smirk completely vanished. The color drained from her cheeks so fast it looked as if she'd seen a ghost. "What is it, sweetie?" my mother asked, her cheerful tone faltering. Vanessa's lips parted, but no sound came out. She frantically flipped to the second page, then the third, her hands starting to tremble. Inside that folder were the master deeds, land trust certificates, and commercial acquisition filings for the entire Oak Ridge development zone. "Read the top line out loud, Vanessa," I said quietly, leaning back in my chair. When she stayed silent, I spoke for the whole table to hear. "That master plan community you just signed a rent-to-own agreement for? The entire land parcel, including the commercial hub, the infrastructure, and the residential development trust, was bought 4 months ago by Apex Holdings. And as the chief executive and sole shareholder of Apex, I am your landlord." A suffocating silence fell over the room. Uncle Bob stopped mid-chew. My aunt's wine glass froze halfway to her mouth. My mother's jaw dropped open as she stared between the official gold seal documents and me. "You're lying," Vanessa whispered, her voice cracking. "This isn't real. You don't have this kind of money." I pointed directly to the final signature page, stamped by the state land registry. "It's entirely real, Vanessa. You just committed to pay me rent for the next 5 years." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The smug condescension that had filled the air just moments ago evaporated, replaced by a desperate, panicked chaos. My mother was the first to break the silence. She scrambled out of her chair, her eyes wide as she looked at me as if seeing a complete stranger. "Chloe, darling, My mother stuttered, her voice suddenly dripping with a sweet, nervous affection I hadn't heard in years. Why didn't you tell us? An empire? My brilliant daughter. We could have celebrated this together. Celebrated? I asked, raising an eyebrow. 10 minutes ago, you called me a lost soul and laughed while Vanessa mocked my life. Vanessa's fiancé looked terrified, staring down at the legal papers on the table. Vanessa herself was fighting back tears of humiliation, her arrogance completely shattered. Uncle Bob suddenly cleared his throat, leaning forward with an overly warm smile. You know, Chloe, I always knew you had that sharp business mind like your grandfather. I'm actually looking for an investor for my logistics expansion. Stop, I said, my voice quiet, firm, and absolute. The table fell dead silent once again. I looked around at their expectant, pleading faces. 4 or 5 years, I was invisible to all of you because I didn't fit your neat little mold. You treated me like a failure when I was frugally building my future, and you only value me now because there's a $sign attached to my name. Respect isn't something you give people only after they show you their bank account. It's something you give because they're family. My mother opened her mouth to protest, but I held up my hand, stopping her before she could offer another hollow excuse. I carefully reached across the dining table, picked up my blue folder, and placed it neatly back inside my tote bag. I zipped it shut, stood up, and looked at the stunned faces surrounding the dinner table. I came here tonight to share a meal with my family, I said softly, looking my mother straight in the eyes. Instead, I was reminded that love and respect in this house were always conditional. My sister kept her head down, unable to meet my gaze. My mother reached out, her hand trembling. Chloe, please stay. It's Christmas. Merry Christmas, Mom, I replied, offering a calm, peaceful smile. I'm going to spend the rest of the evening with people who valued me when I had nothing. I turned around and walked out of the dining room, the sharp click of my heels echoing off the walls. As I stepped out into the crisp winter night and got into my car, a profound sense of freedom washed over me. I didn't need their validation anymore. If you've ever been doubted by the people who were supposed to support you, let this be a reminder. Move in silence, work hard, and let your success do the talking. How would you have handled this dinner? Let me know in the comments below.